I'm Chris from Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., a show taking a look at the greater Marvel Cinematic and Television universes, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other marvelously geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
And welcome to Play Comics, where once again we're looking at a video game based on a comic property and how well it represents that source material. And today we are jumping into some weird timiness because Doug and I just talked about this kind of, but you're not going to hear it for a very long time because that is how the passage of time works. And I kind of spoiled things a little bit because I have Doug Adamson here from the Monitor Tapes. Doug, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks very much for having me on the show. Looking forward to this for ages.
I am very happy to have you on. Not only because you really seem to know your stuff with DC, but also because we just talked about Crisis and how I am a horrible person for never having read it, which is true as of the time of recording as well, but might not be true by the time this comes out.
You're not a horrible person for not reading it. You followed instructions from my co-host DC Dave. So blame him. You've got nothing to worry about.
Okay, good. Also, I'm excited to just hear you talk because Scottish is one of my more favoriter accents.
Oh, I'm posh Scottish, I've been told. So I'm not true Scots, as some people would say. As you probably know, the Scottish accent, there are many different versions of it, from depending where you're from. But I've got a soft Edinburgh Scottish accent, I've been told. So there you go.
That just means that more people will be able to understand you.
That is quite true. When we often talk about the fact that when Scots are speaking to other Scots, they use a very different accent to each other as they would do when they're having to speak to somebody who's not from the local area. So therefore we try and modulate our voice so it's a little slower. But I've been reliably informed that it's either New Zealand or Scottish accents that are the fastest version of English. In general, because obviously if you watch King of the Hill, and is it Boomhauer, I think, that speaks at, or Cooper Cup, the American footballer, speak at a rate of knots, other than that, but generally we're supposed to be very quick. So I will do my best. Hopefully you'll understand everything I say.
Well, I'm used to listening to you at about 1.5 speed, so hearing you talk at just 1 time speed is a really big help right now.
I do warn people not to listen to our podcast at 1.5 speed because it drives them nuts, but more power to them if they can.
But we're not here to talk about how wonderful your accent is, although it is. But instead, we are looking at Justice League Chronicles. But first, we just really need to know, what is it that got you into the DC side of things in the first place?
Oh, that's a difficult question to answer without going way back in time. But I started reading comics, I think, when I was around about 5 or 6 years old. In the UK, there's a comic book called The Beano. There used to be another one called The Dandy, which was aimed at very much young readers. It's a comedy book, etc. And at the same time, I think I started picking up the occasional American comic off the shelves, and started reading them because I loved the pictures, I loved reading stories. My grandmother, on my mother's side, used to play Batman and Robin with me on the stairs, pretending we were in the Batmobile. I was always Robin. Didn't appreciate that. But anyway, so in that respect, we just seemed to be exposed to DC more than anything else. And when I was growing up in a town called Dumfries, which is in the south of Scotland, that's a different accent again, the shop that I would buy comics from didn't really stock Marvel comics at all because they were American ones, and we just seemed to get DC. We would get reprints of the Marvel ones in the UK for later on, but majority of my comics were just DC, and I've just always gravitated to that environment. So I've been reading, let me think, probably I found when I went through my collection, I've got comics from like 1979, which are DC comics, and I must have been reading them age 5 or 6. So that's just how it's always been.
So a good 20 years or so then. That's how time works, right?
That's sort of how time works. I think we're more in the mid-40s, to be fair.
Has it stayed mostly DC for you? Have you branched out a little bit, or what?
I have dabbled. I dabbled in every once in a while I would go, let's go and try Marvel. And every once in a while I'd go, well, I like the Avengers, but the Fantastic Four is not good. And I remember I got the reprints in the UK, which were Secret Wars and Secret Wars 2 and they just didn't repeat Secret Wars. They had other issues from other Spider-Man comics, and I think I got a few Spider-Man comics as well. So I knew a lot of the Marvel generalish history. But every time I try Marvel, it's like, I think I get fed up of it. However, there's lots of other universes that I loved. I mean, there was a comic company called CrossGen. I bought every issue they produced. I loved their stuff. They went bust. There was a universe called the Ultraverse, which was by Malibu, who were basically another creator universe. I got every issue of that. It went bust. In fact, it was bought out by Marvel, actually. I've tried a lot of Image titles early on. A lot of them just fizzled out. So I still read some Dark Horse occasionally, but it's mainly licensed stuff. So when it comes to the capes and cowls, it's mainly DC. Mainly because everything else has been killed off.
And what is it about the Justice League in particular that just really has kept your attention?
Well, I think the best thing about the Justice League is everyone thinks it's this massive organisation, like the X-Men, who has got, I don't know how many X-Men there are now these days, or the Legion of Superheroes, which is the other big DC superhero team that everyone talks about having loads and loads and loads of members. But DC seems to, the Justice League always seems to have just enough members to be interesting at any one time, but not always the same members every story. So, for instance, if you look at an Avengers era, for example, in Marvel, there's an era of Cap, Thor, Iron Man, Black Widow, and 2 others, and they'll be that same team for about 12 issues, and you won't really have anyone else popping in and out. Whereas with the Justice League, you're more like, if you've got 20 members, issue 5 will have 7 members, and issue 8 will have a completely different 7 members because they're all busy doing other things. So you get to see a better combination, I would argue. So it's a lot more fun. And there's something about the Justice League. It's the iconic ones, though. It is the premier superheroes. It's Superman. It's Batman. It's Wonder Woman. The top 3 original superheroes that were around. And then you've got Green Lantern and Flash that were, again, icons. Martian Manhunter is my favourite member of the Justice League of the big one, the big icons. Doesn't get as much love as he should do, but I think he's fantastic. And then you've got to figure out whether it's Aquaman or whoever. So you've got the icons at the top level, but I actually like an expanded league when you've got maybe 20 or 30 members to call on. So because that means you can get like Blue Beetle in, who is my absolute favourite superhero.
What experience do you have with the Justice League animated cartoon series?
I have seen every episode of the animated TV series 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 times over the years. I've rewatched them regularly. I've watched them alongside other podcasts that were doing coverages of them. I've tried to watch them with my kids. I remember when they were shown in the UK, it was very sporadic, and you had to. It was difficult to download them how old am I? It says to record them with a VHS player recorder off the TV, and you're pausing, and there would be advert breaks. It was a right pain, but I collected all those, and then they brought them out in DVD when DVDs became a thing, and we could buy them. So they were first purchased. So I know the DCAU Justice League very, very well. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I am very comfortable in that universe.
Wait, so I want to jump back to probably the most important part in there. You tried to watch it with your kids? Like, do they not love you enough to watch it with you?
I think they got a bit fed up with the Justice League because they were also watching DC Superhero Girls at the same time. And DC Superhero Girls, because I've got twin daughters, both named after superheroes, and we had Young Justice at the same time, at roughly the same time. So they were getting a different flavour of the superheroes so there was Dad's old cartoons, as they put it, and I'm thinking they're not that old. And then you look back and go, no, they are quite old. They're 20 years old, some of them, or even older. And then there was the kids' cartoons that the ones they were watching right now, who were slightly brighter colours and slightly more aimed for them at their age group. So they'll sit and watch it if it's on, but they'd much rather when I tried to watch it with them, they much preferred watching their version of the DC Supergirls and Young Justice and Teen Titans Go. Oh god, they love Teen Titans Go.
Well, I can't blame them for wanting to watch any of those. Those are all good series as well. Plus, DC Superhero Girls has Jessica Cruz, the best Green Lantern in it, and any exposure for her is good for me.
I love Jessica Cruz as a Green Lantern, and it's a shame they've not made more of her. I don't think she's appeared in anything other than DC Superhero Girls, and she should be far more popular. And I keep hoping she's going to appear somehow in this new live-action DC film universe that we're getting, which has got the TV stuff and the lanterns. I would love her to show up, because she's got a great story. We're not here to talk about her, because she's not part of that ECU. But yes, I do. I totally agree with why you think she's the best.
I know for me growing up, these cartoons were basically everything I knew about DC and Marvel, for that matter, but especially DC, because when I would go to the grocery store or whatever other random store that would have comics in it, they wouldn't have DC stuff ever. So I had the Batman cartoon, the Superman cartoon, both of those rolled into this. And then eventually this became Justice League Unlimited. This was all I had. So knowing that this cartoon is as good and beloved as it is, and doesn't ruin any actual comic storylines, is a really big thing for me.
No, you're right. It didn't ruin anything. It adapted them very well, and it came up with stuff that we hadn't seen before, and some great stories and great mixes. Despite the fact that, Hawkwoman was never an original member of the Justice League, she came in much later on, and yet she was there at the beginning. There was no Aquaman, effectively. Not that big a deal. So he's missing from the original 7. So in that respect, it's a very well done, and it's possibly the best animated version there's been in terms of story.
And because I know how you feel about Flashes, it's just no question, hey, it's Wally. Where's Barry? Nobody cares. They don't talk about him.
I don't know if Barry's even a thing in that universe. I've never figured that out. Some people suggested he is and isn't, but Wally was my Flash. Wally was the Flash I followed after the end of Crisis. Wally is the one I grew up with, effectively. And I tried reading the old Barry stuff before Crisis. And towards the end it was really, really dire. Although the best appearances of the Flash were in Justice League back then, until Wally got his own book, and it was much better. So yeah, I agree. Wally is good, and they've depowered him completely compared to what he normally. The Barry Allen Flash is a lot faster in theory, but the version you see in Justice League in the cartoon and in the game is the Wally speed, where he hasn't quite mastered his speed powers, which is great, because if a speedster's at full speed, then you can't beat them, no matter what you do, because they're just so many steps ahead of you.
Well, on that note, we're going to go do something really, really fast, so fast that you're not even going to notice what we did, while I jump some promos for a few other shows.
Transmitter device activated. Coordinates set for Earth 2.
In 1961, in the pages of issue 123 of The Flash, Barry Allen, the Silver Age Flash of Earth 1, travelled to another dimension, met Jay Garrick, the Golden Age Flash of Earth 2, and the DC multiverse as we know it was born.
And in 1985, after many years of cross-dimensional adventures, DC Comics published the cataclysmic Crisis on Infinite Earths, and the DC multiverse was gone.
But did you know that Barry Allen's Flash was not the first hero to meet a version of himself from another dimension?
Did you know that Jay Garrick wasn't even the first Golden Age character to return in the Silver Age of comics?
The scope of the pre-Crisis DC multiverse reaches far beyond Earth 1 and Earth 2.
And the legacy of DC's Golden Age characters It's a lot wider than the heroes you know like Flash, Green Lantern, Sandman and Starman.
On the Earth 2 podcast, we navigate the pre-crisis DC Comics multiverse of universes and other dimensions.
And we celebrate and explore the legacy of DC's Golden Age characters, including the legendary Justice Society of America, and a lot more besides.
So join me, Peter Watson,
And me, David Steele, and our occasional guests of friends, family and fellow podcasters
for weekly dramatic readings and analysis of the pre-crisis DC Comics multiverse and the legacy of their Golden Age characters through the Silver and Bronze Ages of comics.
on
The Earth 2 podcast.
Transmatter cube activated. Return coordinates set for Earth Prime.
Hey, welcome to the Last Comic Shop Podcast!
A comic book podcast that actually talks about comics.
Yep, each week we open the shop up and read and discuss a comic.
Sometimes we pair that up with comic book movies or TV shows.
Or not, lots of times it's just comic books and sound effects.
Oh, yes, definitely lots of sound effects.
So tune in on all the major podcasting platforms for the Last Comic Shop Podcast. Or check out our library of evergreen shows at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
Those are some great things to check out. But first, let's finish up here. So, Doug, what is really bringing us together today is this November 2003, at least in the US, because I am very America-centric with my dates. Justice League Chronicles came out for the Game Boy Advanced, made by Midway and Full Fat. Midway's done some things you've probably heard of.
Did Midway not do the Justice League book, Justice League game that came out on PlayStation 2?
I know they did Justice League and Justice for All. I don't believe that they were in on the PlayStation one.
Oh, right. Because up until we looked at this one, that was the one I remember playing the most.
Or I just haven't gotten to it yet.
Well, yes. Justice League Heroes, I think, was the one I'm thinking of. That was PlayStation. And it was nothing to do with Midway. My apologies.
This game basically plays like 3 episodes of the Justice League animated cartoon in basically every way you could possibly think of. It has real simple storylines that just let the characters do their thing, and it cuts the roster down so that you're not having to deal with everybody in every single level, which can be good or bad, depending on who you like, but I'm sure we'll get into that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's the old Justice League trope that they would take their cast of, 6 heroes for one story, and they'd break them up into different mixes of pairs to go off and deal with something, and they'd all come back together for the finale. And that's a comic book thing, that's something that's happened in the animated series, and yes, it happens in the game. So I agree, it felt very much like playing a version of one of those episodes, but not any of the episodes you'd seen before, a brand new episode.
The first level you've got here, you have John Stewart, Green Lantern, paired up with the Wally West Flash. I think that's a fairly good one to start out with. I mean, to be fair, you can't really make a bad team up here because you've got Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, John Stewart, Flash, Wally, Hawkgirl, and Martian Manhunter. So you can't make a bad team when those are your choices.
No, I mean, it's only if you're all underwater you might need to think, we could have done with Aquaman. But luckily, not an issue in this story. So they need him. Of course, Superman could everyone just puts on his scuba gear and they're fine. But yeah, it's a good combo because it is the iconic 7 from the original seasons when it was just Justice League before it came Justice League Unlimited. So it's the right settings in terms of anybody can pair up with anybody else and they all have their own way of handling things when they're a pair. They all play to each other's strengths.
And naturally, because this is a game, they do kind of pair people off in a let's have somebody faster and, for lack of a better word, weaker, paired up with somebody who's going to be slower and stronger. But that's just a game thing.
Yeah, and they also have somebody who is normally able to, projectile shooty things, and somebody who isn't projectile shooty things. If it's Superman's eye beams, or it's Wonder Woman's, it's Batman's batarangs, or it's John Stewart firing his beam. But they don't really use that because it's much more of a close combat thing. So it's also almost like there's more scope they could have put in if they wanted to, I guess.
But also, you're making this on a Game Boy Advance cart, which, if I'm remembering right, is like 32 megabytes of space. So there's not a ton of room.
No, I mean, it's staggering to think how much those cartridges, and even older Spectrum games like I used to play, how much they could pack into such little space. And now, you know, I'm trying to think, an MP3 piece of music, if you download it these days, could be the same, you know, one piece of music is the same level as an entire video game that takes like an hour and a half to play from start to finish. And that's just mind-boggling to me. And I can't keep, as somebody who works in computing, I keep thinking, coders are lazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. That's why we end up getting games now that are not finished on release day, and you have to get a day one patch.
Yeah, it's staggering. I mean, to be fair, they make these games absolutely massive now, and the graphics are so much better, but still, I'd much rather having a game that the graphics don't have to be perfect, they just need to be good enough and have a strong gameplay function and be complete. And that's what I'd much rather have that.
And that's one thing that I really like about this one. Like, the graphics in here, everybody looks exactly as good as I would expect them to. You know, if you're like me and you're watching it full screen on a 4K monitor, then why? You're insane, because that's not the kind of screen this thing was designed for at all. But once you can get past that part, like, it all looks really good.
I'm being older than you, Chris, by quite some. I remember when these handheld games came out. I remember the Game Boy when it was black and white, far less this advanced color. I mean, that was mind-boggling when it came out. I also I have to admit though, I was more a Sega guy growing up. So I always felt as long as you could identify the characters, even if they're not perfect, that's all you need. And all the characters you can clearly see it's Green Lantern. You can clearly see it's Wonder Woman or Superman. I mean, there's no sense of anybody using even the same sprites as the other characters and just recoloring them. They all look different enough. And even the bad guys look different I mean, it's very impressive.
Yeah, there's absolutely no question. This isn't a case of like, okay, these two characters kind of look the same, so we're going to make sure they're not on a team together. Like, everybody looks really different. You know, I can forgive you if you look at it and say, okay, this is a Green Lantern, but I can't tell which one, or a Flash and the same kind of thing. Although now that I say that, you better be able to tell this is John Stewart Green Lantern for a lot of reasons.
Well, so you don't think it's the Martian Manhunter all in green, and even they look very different in the game, which is, you know, they've done well.
Well, Martian Manhunter is blue.
Well, he's part of his cloak is blue, yes, but he's still green from head to toe.
Maybe I'm more colorblind than I thought.
No, his skin is all green. Martian Manhunter is all green, and then he's got a blue cape with a red cross on his chest to hold it in place, and then he's I'm trying to remember now. I think he's got blue underwear, and I want to say blue boots, but his skin color is all green.
Do you know how many things make a lot more sense now?
I don't know. I hate to think now.
I have some weird color issues. Traditionally, it has mostly been found in darker colors. I'm thinking they're brown. It might be spreading.
Oh dear. Well, fingers crossed you'll be okay playing games.
Or I just get to play everything in black and white.
Good idea. Good idea.
Which would suck for this game, because the colors in here, if you've seen the cartoon, then it is exactly as colorful as the cartoon is. The dialogue in here is exactly what you would expect from the cartoon, except it's all just text on the screen, because they were smart enough not to do speech samples.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they tried to put speech samples in, we'd have blown past the 32 megabit capacity quite quickly. The other thing I would say is, you're saying about the colours, I think it's brighter than the cartoon. I think the cartoon, the characters certainly pop out better than the cartoon when it was first shown. I always remember thinking it was bright, but not as bright as this. Maybe it's just because it's a smaller screen and they had to make sure you could identify the sprites versus anything else.
It could be. Your TV could also have been dying, and you're not playing this on the TV.
That is true. Well, this is the thing. I mean, it's a handheld game. I mean, I have to admit that I had to. I mean, it's a very long time since I played it. I think the last time I played this in person on an actual Game Boy Advance was when I was working in a store, or maybe playing it in a store to get an interpreter. No, I'm wrong. I played it on my friend's Game Boy Advance. That's just what I'm thinking about, because I know it wasn't mine. But I did play up an emulator to compare it against recently, just to make sure it's right. Because I don't think you can buy. There's no way you can buy this game anywhere else these days, which is a shame because it's not the greatest game, but it's good fun.
It's a good, solid little game. I mean, it's only like an hour and a half-ish long, so you're not spending a bunch of time on it, but it also lets you save your game and stuff, so you don't have to replay the same levels over and over just to get there. I mean, it's a real simple, just like isometric 3D-ish beat 'em up, kind of like what the NES X-Men game wished it could be.
I don't think I've played the NES X-Men game.
Oh, please don't.
I've played X-Men games on the Sega Mega Drive, Sega Genesis, because I remember we bought some in America and had to bring them back and put in one of those converter cartridges so it would work on our Mega Drive over in the UK. But I don't think I've played the SNES version. No, that's...
The Super Nintendo ones are good. The regular Nintendo one is straight garbage.
I will remember that then.
And by the time this episode comes out, listeners probably will have gotten to hear my refire of the NES X-Men game.
Oh, wow.
Because that's just how time works, and I know what is going to happen in the future.
That's good going.
But as for this game, I really like that you have such a small cast. Part of me kind of wishes that there were other characters there just kind of in the background. You don't have to have them do anything or anything like that, but it's a 32 megabyte cartridge. There's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I mean, but again, this is when the Justice League was a core of 7, so you don't need any more. I know later on they had guest appearances in the cartoon, but you don't need them for a game like this. Just get on with it, and you still get a pretty good mix of bad guys as well. So it's not as if they're skimping on guest stars.
Although how they match those bad guys up is interesting with the heroes for their levels. Like, I would think that Flash would be going up against Gorilla Grodd because that's just how things go. But instead you have Batman and Hawkgirl going up against Gorilla Grodd.
Yeah, I think it's good that you get to do that, because often you just do get heroes fighting their usual villains. And it's always fun to see, well, I would just take him out with hitting him with a batarang sort of technique. Or I'm trying to remember, there's the famous comic book story about when it was villains actually switching villains, and one guy took on Superman and beat him with using magic, and he says, well, why doesn't everybody else just do card tricks and confuse him? And I remember thinking that was really, really funny, but I thought, well, that's true, because if you swap the people you normally fight against, you get a different dynamic, and that means it's more interesting because you don't know how it's going to go. So in that respect, it's quite funny to see Batman taking Gorilla Grodd. Batman's Battle of Wills. Does Batman ever get mind controlled? It's very rarely he gets controlled, so maybe that's a better choice.
I wish we would get more of that. Maybe we could have gotten more of that kind of thing if Teen Titans hadn't have gotten canceled.
You're talking the original Teen Titans cartoon, yeah?
Yep.
Yep, I share your pain. That was great, that show.
Doug, as we start to wrap things up here, what does this one really get right, looking at the Justice League?
Well, it gets a lot of right. It gets the villains. I mean, you're fighting, no surprises, you're fighting Justice League level villains. You're fighting Eclipso, you're fighting Gorilla Grodd, you've got Vandal Savage in there, and you've got time travel. I mean, you're touching a lot of the big crossover DC things that they do. You've got Amazo or Amazo, or however people pronounce it. I think it's Americans pronounce it Amazo. So you've got a right collection of villains that are Justice League level. You've got the right sort of heroes fighting them. You don't bring in generic people that you've never heard of just for the game. It's all stuff you've heard before, and it's all done very well in terms of they're all within character. There's nothing worse than playing a video game with characters that have been created just for the video game. I think of Batman Rise of Sun Tzu as a perfect example of that. It's like, who the heck is he? You've got to, you've got to engage with them. So in that respect, it's very good. It's, again, as you said, it's an hour and a half to play. So it feels like 3 hours. Sorry, it feels like 3 episodes of the cartoon series. So it feels like a proper story, and it's all tied together. So I don't think there's a lot it does wrong in terms of story. Gameplay, however, it could be better. But in terms of story and how it looks for the cartridges, I think it's really good.
For me, I think the biggest things, besides what you've already mentioned, is just the interaction between the characters that you get. They could have very easily come in and just made a game that was very quick cuts. Batman is here, Superman is here, Wonder Woman is here, and not shown how anything happened. But you get to see those characters talking to each other. You get to see the banter they have, even with the villains in their fights there. Everything just is seeping with that level of either sarcasm or angst or whatever that character has in them in here. And you just really get a good feel for who these characters are.
Yeah, I mean, it was written by people who know the characters, obviously, and could get it all done. I mean, it was nothing ever felt out of character for anything, and it felt like a story. What I should have done is to check to see if the writers were involved with the cartoon. I should have thought of that because they were really well done.
What do you think this one gets wrong? Looking at the Justice League.
Looking at the Justice League, I don't think it gets anything wrong. I think it compared to the cartoon and it fits right into that universe. So there's, again, my issues are with gameplay rather than the story and the way it's set up and the characters. I found it very difficult, and I'm not a big fan of beat-em-ups in terms of just repetitively hunt, fight, beat, fight, beat, fight, beat, fight. And it does have the elements where it's, there's the flying and the running sections, where it's the 3D isometric from behind, and I quite like those again. But I have to say, the whole thing is, I'm not a great game player. I'm terrible at a lot of games. So it took me a long time to get anywhere in it. But in terms of the Justice League, I think it doesn't do much. I don't think it has a really foot out of place. It manages to get everything in there.
Yeah, I'm stretching for something that it got wrong. And the only thing I can come up with is it has teams of 2, and that is it. And if the Justice League needed a third person, they would send a third person. But also, that's the only thing I can come up with.
Yeah, but again, it is quite common. It was quite common back in the day. Maybe just a society more so. But certainly, they would break up the League. They'd go and send them in certain parts of the mission. They'd all come back towards the end. And that's exactly what this game does. It splits them up, puts them in different combinations, and sends them off. So I don't think that's particularly bad. I think it works quite well. And goodness knows, I don't know if you could control... How would you have a battle with all 7 members at the same time? That'd be a nightmare.
It would be. And I'm not saying it needs to happen. I'm not even saying it's wrong. It's just, that's the only thing I can think of at all. So in that respect, they did really good.
Yes, I agree with you. They did really good in terms of the pitch, in terms of compared to the comics, compared to the animated universe. I think they got a lot right. But again, the gameplay was really difficult for me because I'm terrible at games.
If you knew somebody who wanted to get into the greater Justice League aspects and not just the animated series that this one is based on, would you give them this game as part of a primer course?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. It gives you the heroes in character. They're not different to what you would expect to see elsewhere. They're all using their powers correctly. And it's I would say it's a fairly good introduction to the DCU, well, maybe not the DCU, but certainly DC animated universe that the Justice League were in. And I think that would work quite well. I mean, they don't need to know everything, but it does introduce, Gorilla Grodd, who's a regular problem for the Flash. It introduces Eclipso. It has Vandal Savage. These are all fairly well-known supervillains, and at the same time, you're not thrown at the deep end because they sort of they're just there and you get on with it. So, yeah, I think it's a fairly good way to introduce somebody to that universe.
The only thing that I can say that doesn't make this a super slam dunk, of course, this is like the best thing possible, is that this one doesn't really explain who anybody is. So this is definitely made for people who have some kind of understanding of who these characters are already. That being said, you're looking at characters that are pretty popular. So I don't think it's a big stretch to think that you're going to know who these characters are already.
Let me think. Not everyone, but most people have heard of Superman or seen Superman or seen the S-Shield. Most people will have heard of Batman, even if they've never actively sought him out. He's been around a lot. He's been on TV. Wonder Woman is referenced in lots of things as well. I mean, even though she's not been on TV for a very long time, since the 1970s Linda Carter show, or the 1980s anyway, Linda Carter show. So these are iconic people. So you don't need to really know them to know them. They know them around. Flash, the name gives it away. So once you know, oh, he's a Flash. Does he run fast? Yeah. Okay, you've pretty much nailed him. Green Lantern, you might have to explain a bit. And Hawk Girl, does she have wings? Yes. Well, that figures out her power set. And then you've got Martian Manhunter, who is probably the most obscure of all of them. So I can see how somebody who's never had any experience with comics or TV or anything like that might find this game to be like, who are these people? But at the same time, it's fairly quick to figure out what they can actually do, except maybe Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter. But that's always the issue you have. So I would say that it should be okay-ish to pick up quite quickly, even if you're completely unaware of who these people are.
Yeah, I think this is definitely going to get onto the short list of this is like a super go-to example of a game to give to somebody as an introduction.
I would say so.
And finally, let's add a secret boss to the end of this game. Which Muppet do you think is going to be the real villain behind everything going on here?
Did you just say Muppet? Do I need to think of a Muppet to take over this?
Yes, you do, because that is what I do on this show.
That's a tough call. Which Muppet would be behind all of this? Everyone would say Gonzo, but it's not Gonzo. Gonzo's too kind-hearted. He wouldn't do anything like that. Animals, everyone is too disorganized. He can sort this all out. I would say, if anyone, it's Dr. Bunsen, because Dr. Bunsen's the guy that's going to be playing with time travel. He's going to be playing with, what does this dark diamond do that creates the power of Eclipso? And he's going to be responsible for building a robot and trying to talk to apes. So yeah, Dr. Bunsen's the man behind the whole lot. That's the Muppet. That's who I'd pick.
Bum, bum, bum. Now I'm just completely scared of everything that I've seen in Muppet Babies and all of the crazy things that he comes up with.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Bunsen, I always think he's the evil genius. If there is, not that he's evil, and he's certainly not a genius, but if there was an evil genius out of the lot, it would be Dr. Bunsen. He's more like an accidental disaster walking along. So it just maybe gives... I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. If you've ever heard the Jar Jar Binks Dark Jedi theory, that he's a drunken master, that's Dr. Bunsen if he was a bad guy. Because he just creates mayhem, he puts Speaker through terrible, terrible things, and has no care for what happens after the end of the experiment. He just moves on. So yeah, there you go.
Well, Doug, it has been great talking to you about all of this. If people want to hear more from you and maybe some other crazy thoughts like that, where else can they find you around the internet?
But there's been a lot of crazy thoughts all the time, to be honest. So normally you could find me on the Brick Crisis Network on the podcast The Monitor Tapes. Now, The Monitor Tapes is one about we've touched on it very briefly. It's about Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is a 40-year-old or 41-year-old, depending on how you schedule it, comic book series covering the multiverse of DC Comics up from 1940s all the way up to 1985, where they basically smashed them all together into one universe. That didn't last long, but still, it was the greatest DC comic, and possibly the greatest comic crossover of all time. So every month, myself and DC Dave, we talk about the Crisis. So that's the best place to find me. I occasionally pop up with things to do with Lego. I run a big Lego show in Edinburgh called Edinbrick, and that's in Scotland, by the way. So you might see my name there. So there's the best places to find me at the moment, I would say.
Well, as always, we'll have links to that down in the show notes, because clicking links is so much easier than trying to remember how to spell things.
As a dyslexic, I totally agree.
As for me, the best place you can find me is over on playcomics.com, where there's links to all the social media things, which is pretty much Blue Sky and Threads, because that's just where I go and where I have been, and I am an old man settled in my ways, like a nice worn pair of pants. If you want to be on the show, then you can check out the list of things that I have a link to down in the show notes to see what games I'm looking to get booked the soonest. Those are starting to get snatched up. So I just added some new things in there. It's a lot of good stuff in there. But if you want to be on the show, there's also lots of good things still on that list. So look at the list up there, grab something. If you don't see something for you, maybe you'll see something for a friend. Or if you can't commit yourself to a full episode, then maybe you can just send in thoughts on one of the ones that's already been recorded. For this one here, the Masked Game Counselor over on Blue Sky said, I absolutely hated this era of, well, the Xbox version has this villain, but the PSP version has these extra heroes. Justice League Chronicles and X-Men Legends 2 were both hella guilty of that. And Blair Farrell came out and said, I like how it tried to capture the pre-Unlimited Justice League by focusing on 2 members of the team at a time in different, unrelated episodes. Also, you get to punch Nazis, which is always a good thing. I added that part about how it's always been a good thing, but knowing Blair, the only reason he didn't say it was because he knew I would. DC Dave following up with that, saying that's a very golden age Justice Society of America storytelling trope. The team starts together and then immediately pairs off and does their own side quest. If you want to get your thoughts on a future episode, then the best thing to do is really just pay attention to when I tell you what the next episode is going to be. As soon as I tell you what it's going to be, you can let me know thoughts one way or another. There's all kinds of ways to contact the show. The first time you can hear what the next episode is going to be is right now, when I'm telling you that the next episode is going to be the Multipath Adventures of Superman. Yes, it's a computer game that I wouldn't normally cover, but guess what? I have a good guest to look at it with, so we're going to do it because it's my show and I can do what I want. Also, people tend to like those weird episodes that look at something that I wasn't really planning on looking at. If you want to help support the show, then you can be like Dan McMahon or Ono Lit Class and give the show money, because unfortunately it does cost money to run a podcast. Or you can just tell other people about it so that they all know that it exists. Tell your friends, your family, the weird person that's walking down the street right now, walking their dog, but also not walking their dog because they're letting their dog stop everywhere. You know, maybe tell them to pay attention to their dog, but also listen to the podcast because it's good. Don't forget that Play Comics is a part of the GetAGeek.com network, home to such other wonderful shows as Capes on the Couch. Anthony, Doc, I love you guys. I want you to come back. Not right now, because that would be in the past, because this is getting released in the future, but come back. I need my Spider-Gwen episode. I'm being selfish. Come on. If you want to hear Carrington Martin and I talk about those lessons we learned from kids media that all of a sudden we're supposed to not remember because it's too horrible and anti-capitalist and everything, and just not the way society actually works, even though it was the way we were taught to behave the entire time we were going to school, then you want to check out Sugar Spite and Everything Is Fine. There's a link to that down in the show notes as well. If you like the music that I'm rudely talking on top of right now, head on over to backandtrack.gg and check out all the great music over there and maybe find something for your own project. But most of all, just grab a game, grab a stack of comics, and go find yourself a new favorite character. That just means that more people will be able to understand you.
That is quite true. When we often talk about the fact that when...
And this is the part where Doug got so annoyed at me that he dropped out and his internet presumably died. But also he said, hey, I'm not here to talk about my accent. I'm here to talk about comics and stuff. So Doug said, Chris, I don't like you anymore. You're not my friend. How did you sucker me into this? I have no idea. This is also the part where I'm going to have to call Dave and tell him that his co-host is a horrible person because he, I don't know, something abandoned me.
Sorry about that. It just lost my connection completely. Don't know what happened.
I, like usual, blame the English.
Yes, I would often blame the English as well. Yeah, I can't...
This is Dropout number 2. Doug will be back in just a few minutes. Until then, giraffe facts. Giraffes think they are better than you because they can get things off the top shelf.
Right.
Welcome back. Doug dropped out for the 3rd time. This is the point where he got so annoyed at just the thought of the NES X-Men game existing that he threw up and ran away. Oh, look, Doug came back and he heard the end of that.
Yes, I do apologize.
That's fine. I'm just giving myself fun things to hear while I edit.